Yeah, well, before I start, if you want to go to the boat tomorrow, you have to contact Emilio Oka, that he's taking care of the people that is not included in the list yet. So, well, this is, for sure, a lot of you know what I'm going to talk about. I'm sorry. And I ran out of ideas, and I'm getting old. I don't know. But I did a little change in the presentation. I made it smaller and I think more interesting. So, what? Well, what's Patagonia? Patagonia is where we're going to be Small Talks 2011. Okay? What is Gloria Bianchi? Yeah. Well, we hope, I don't know, just kidding. Well, Patagonia is a registration system for conferences that we did for ISUC. It looks like that. If you registered to go to ISUC this year, that's the application that they used. Not too much to say about it. It's not important. It's under MIT. You can download it. You can see it. Has some interesting things, others not so much. But what I'm going to talk about is well, about the title. Why design principles? Well, because we do design all the time and we always make mistakes. So the idea is to try to avoid those mistakes. And I like the design principles behind Smalltalk title, so I took that from Dan. And what are the goals of the tips that I'm going to talk about? Well, mainly to have a robust software. And one of the goals is that the software should be easy to maintain and to understand, and it should help us in the process of learning how the design is and how it is developed. Yes? So the idea is, one of the main ideas that I'm trying to look for on these tips is for the system to tell us how to use it. Yes? And if we make a mistake, let us know as soon as we can. And of course to make the computers do more and we humans less. Okay, why in action? Because I'm going to code. I hope my fingers will be fast enough today. And why with TDD? Because that's the way I develop. I don't see another nice way to do it. What's TDD? For those that don't know, it's very simple. And go back to write the next test, okay? And this one stops. So, what I'm going to do is, this is a requirement of the system that we have to implement. That is Patagonia less kind of requirement. So we have a conferences that have a start date and a last date, and they last for a fixed number of days, like small talks. People have to register to attend to the conference, and they have to provide their names and the dates that they will attend. And only registered people can submit talks, proposals, and they have to provide a name for it. That's the thing that we will try to implement, okay? So, so this is because we're going to use TDD. How does it? Yeah, is it the font big enough? Okay, cool. So the first thing that we have to decide when doing TDD or using any, using class object-oriented languages is that we have to put a name for a class. Yeah, the first thing that we have to do. And sometimes it's very difficult because you don't have enough information to name a class. Yes. So how do we call this test class? We have to start writing a test for all these requirements. Maybe I'm going too fast. Yes? So we should start writing the easiest test possible. For example, let's say that the conference has a start date and an end date. And so we have to decide the name for the class where we're going to put all these tests. Yes? So for sure we can start thinking, oh, why don't we call it test conference or, I don't know, blah, blah. But what I'm trying to say here is that sometimes we don't have enough information to name something. So my advice when that happens is to use a meaningless name instead of a bad name. Yeah, so for example, I would call this test X. No meaning at all. Yeah? So that's why that? I mean, people say, well, it doesn't make sense. Well, it has some advantages, and the advantages are, well, that's the design tip one. Yeah? Use meaningless names instead of bad names. Why? Because bad names are interpreted as names, and with time, people get used to them. Yeah, so it's very common to see classes that are called, like in Java, a collection helper or wherever manager. Yeah, those are really bad names, and we get used to those names because we see them all the time. So instead, if we have a meaningless name, we will be forced to change it some way, someday, and that's part of the refactor, step on TDD. So I don't know. I like that. Start with names that don't make too much sense. And then we have the second challenge is how do we call this test? So I'm not going to put too much right now, just use a bad name again. I'm not going to write all the tests. Oh, sorry. I have them here. So my first test, why is so small? Oh, because the resolution changed. Okay. So my first test would be this one. I have a conference. I create a conference, smalltalk 2010, of course, that starts. No, this is not the first one. Wait a minute. Ooh. Oh, okay, I know. It's not a copy, it's a move. Okay, sorry. These things happen. So, dates, November, blah, 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 to, like this, yes. So, conference, define new. We know that time interval. It's very useful to do it on the debugger while you are programming. Yes. So now we have to implement the start date. And this is something about, for example, naming the protocols or the categories. I don't like the accessing. I think protocols should be about the meaning of the cohesion of those messages, and we're talking about the dates of the conferences. That's why I'm using dates. So and now from yes, and the end date will be dates 2. Proceed. Okay, test run. We're all happy. Yes. So what's the problem with this implementation? What do you think? Is there a problem with this? About the design? No, I mean, it's working. But what about the design? Is it good? Okay, I don't like it. Why I don't like it? Because I can do this. I can create a conference and I can send the message self start date and it will fail. Yes? And I don't like that to happen. Why? Why if I have an object that is an instance of that is representing a conference, why when I ask it something, it doesn't work? It's confusing. So you might say, okay, why don't you do this? Let's have a start date and end date. So it won't fail. Yeah, but I can do the same. I mean, I can create an instance of this class, and then I can, I cannot set the start date or the end date, and when I ask them for that, it will return nil. But at the end, we have the same problem, yes, because somebody is going to send a message to that, and it will blow up anyway, yes. So what is the problem here? Well, the problem is that we are creating instances of classes that don't answer the messages the same way all the time. It depends on the time, and it depends on how many objects they know. Yes? And that sometimes is tricky. I mean, it's difficult to know. If you have a complex class, how do you know that you have that you created the object in the right way? You will have to go to the class, see all the accessors, setters, or whatever to see how to create it. Look for code that is similar or that is creating objects of that class. So, what is my design tip? My design tip is not this one, yeah, this one. Sorry, I'm going to go to that in a moment. Objects must be complete since their creation time. Yeah? So, what is it about? What is it about? It's about doing this. So, the idea is that you create a conference telling it, in this case, these are the dates, okay? It's going to be during this time. So now we implement it really fast. Yes, it's an instance creation message, time interval, self new initialize during a time interval. Proceed, implement, this is an initialization. Well, I don't know. And now it works. And there is no way, well, of course you could say, yes, I can still send the message new to a conference and have an invalid instance. Yeah, that's true. But you can impose a rule, yeah, that says that when a class has an instance creation message, you shouldn't use new. You have to use the instance creation messages, and that's all you need to do. And then all your objects will be always complete. There is no problem on when you send the messages. Okay? It's not that you're going to have an incomplete object. Yes? About the previous tips that I forgot. About when doing TDD, you have to follow a pattern on how to write the test. That is very, from people that are starting, is very important. That is, you have to have a setup, a setup part of your system, of your test, then an exercise, and then the verification that everything is working. That's a very easy task, an easy pattern to follow. And the other one is that if you're doing TDD on Smalltalk, use the debugger. Okay? That's very different from other languages. Yes, Java is a little bit complex. They like to do things like that. It's amazing how this is weird to some people, from another communities, to see that we can program in the debugger. I mean, the debugger is not anymore a debug tool. It's a tool to program, to write code. So, for example, I did a small video like 2 weeks ago, I don't remember, comparing how to do TDD in Java and Smalltalk that shows this difference. And I sent the mail to the Agile community, and I got these kind of responses. For example, I don't use the debugger when doing TDD in Java. If I do it, it means I did a big step. I don't know why. Or the other, this one is really good. The debuggers in Java or that takes too much time. I hit my programmers if they use them. So, anyway, I'm happy we're using Smalltalk. So, okay, I already think I talked about that. There is a nice thing about the design tip of using, this kind of instance creation message and then the initialize. I mean, you will see that I will always follow the pattern of calling, the name for the initialize, the same as the name of the instance creation message with the initialize at the beginning. So if you see that you do that all the time, then you can change your debugger to do it for you. I don't have it here. I didn't have time to do it, but the idea is that when you're working with the debugger has enough context information to make those decisions and help you write less code. So okay, now let's go to the next test. Where am I? Here, sorry. If you are lost, me too. Well, the second one, for example, is this one. It's, I don't know if it's a good idea. I think I will, well, anyway. Sorry, didn't have time to try it. So the idea here is I create a conference, and then I create an attendee that is going to be Lucas. Where is Lucas? There, over there. That he's going to attend all the dates, and I register Lucas, okay? So what I have to verify is that the number of people that is registered is 1, and that Lucas is registered, okay? So that's a pretty easy test. Have to define the attendee, and now we'll implement, I don't know, whatever. This is going to be the same as I have here. Proceed. Okay, dates, implement dates as okay, over. So now I have to create the attendee. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the current implementation, not all, just some part of it. Don't look at this. Okay, so I get the name and the conference dates. I create the object, initialize it. And assign the parameters to the instance variables. And then, okay, register. Have to implement. I don't know if you're following me, but have to implement the register. So what I'm going to do is just have a instance variable for that. Of course, this is going to fail because I have to initialize that instance variable. I'm going to use an order collection. What?
Why in that method?
In initialization of the conference.
Because this is the main entry.
Well, I'm using conference as the main, I'm not using subsystem architecture.
My question is, because this is your instance creation method.
Yeah, the instance creation message is this one.
Yeah.
And then there is always one initialization message.
Okay.
Yes? So you have everything in one. Of course, if the initialization is too complex, you can extract methods and whatever. So let's try to make it run. So number of registered people is, I think this is going to take too much time. Size, and then I have to, is registered, well, I put it, I don't know where, is registered, okay. It's just, if it includes the attendee, proceed, and now it works. Okay? So now the next step would be the next test. I think the easiest one is to Oops, sorry. So now we have to create a proposed talk. Okay, we have the attendee, and we create a proposed talk that did about dynamic, I don't remember, languages or something, and submit the talk. Okay. So what I'm going to do, the same thing. Yeah, I don't know if it's a good idea. Maybe it's taking too long. So now we are in the implementation of the instance creation message of the proposed talk. I'm going to remove this. And I follow the same pattern, okay? I create the proposed talk with the people, with the person that is proposing the talk, and with a name. Yes, the idea is to, have everything since the moment you create the object. Whatever. So in this case, I'm going to keep those objects, the author and the name. And now, well, what happened? I don't know what happened. The submit talk message I'm going to do something very similar to what we did, just add it to a collection of proposed talks. Yes, it's very simple. This is not no-brainer. So now, of course, it's going to fail. I want to go a little bit faster. So I have to initialize the proposed talks collection. Go back. And okay, I have to implement the number of talks and if the proposed talks include. Yes, I'm going to do it from here just to make it faster because we don't have too much time. Sorry, this takes some time. ¿Qué? Te escucho, te escucho. No, I'm doing crazy stuff here. Sorry. If you're lost, come on. Yes. Propose talk, and then I have to implement. Propose talks, and this is going to be just return. Propose talks includes a proposed talk. Okay, so now we have both tests running. That's fine. So now we can start to think about the model, okay, and the functionality. For example, clever people could start thinking about, okay, can an attendee have an empty name, for example? Yes, I mean, does it make sense to create an attendee that doesn't have a name? And for sure, if you go to the product owner, he will tell you no, it doesn't make sense. Okay, so we write a test for that. And I'm going to say that if we have an attendee with an empty name, it should raise an error, and the error is going to be this. I'm going to explain you why I'm doing this. So what I'm going to say is, if I try to create an attendee with an empty name, that will there's going to be an assertion that's going to fail. Okay, and the name of the assertion is this one. Attendee name should not be empty. Assertion 4. You're going to see why I have this name. And we created some assertion framework that is, allow us to do this very easily. So, What is going on? Okay, so that is a problem. So if I run the test, it's going to fail. It fails because it's not throwing any exception. Yes, I can create that object, and it's not what we want. So we have to do something here, and what I'm going to do is to write the assertion that verifies that the name is not empty in the instance creation message. I'm going to do that this way. Self. Oh, where is the debugger? Okay, let's open another debugger. Let's start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an assertion for this. Like that. Yes? So what it does is, these are assertions, and these objects will run all the preconditions or assertions that I have in a method. Of course, I have to implement that. And the way I'm going to implement this is using an assertion that we already have, that is collection not empty. Assertion for a name, failure, and I'm going to give it a description in case it fails, that says attendees must have a name. Yes? So now the assertions runner is going to run the assertion, and if one of those don't hold, it will raise the exception, and that exception, it should be this one. Okay? So I'm using the name of the method to create the as a name also of the assertion. And the idea, so what's the design tip behind this? The idea is that you not only have to create objects that are complete, but also objects that are valid. Yes? You should not allow to have invalid objects. That's the idea. Okay, so on the definition of an invalid object in this case for the attendee is an attendee cannot have an empty name. Okay? It must have a name. There are other preconditions, like for example the dates that he says that is going to attend. Yes? They have to be on the range of the dates that the conference is going to be held. Of course, but that's another type of precondition that doesn't depend on the attendee. It depends on the relationship between the conference and the attendee. Okay? So the idea is, it's good to have self-defensive object. That's the idea. Okay? If you make a mistake, the object tells you, hey, you're doing a mistake. So what's the mistake here? The mistake is try to create an attendee with an invalid name. If I try to do this, I can't. Come on. If I try to do this, yes, we will see that we can, because there is an assertion that says attendee must have a name. Okay? And what's the advantage of having this? Well, first of all, you have only valid objects in your system. You will never have invalid objects. If all your objects follow this pattern, then all your objects will always be valid. Yes? And the good thing about it is that the model is telling you how to use it. If you make a mistake, it immediately tells you, no, this is not valid. So you start learning about the domain just using the model. Okay? So we're using the model as a documentation, as a real documentation, live. It's pretty easy to use and implement. So the idea is that you start to verify some business rules. And of course we can do some meta programming on this. We don't care about it. There is another tip that is a consequence of the previous two that I like to mention. I won't show anything in the code. But the idea is, if you have complete objects and those objects are only valid, does it make sense to use nil? Yes? And the question is no. There is no need for nil. And imagine a world without nil. It is easy if you try. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Okay? There is I said that many times, but there is a talk of Tony Hoare about, how bad null is, and he's the one that invented the concept in Algo 60. So it's a very interesting talk. So design tip 4: do not use nil. Okay, nils are bad because they are not polymorphic. You have to check for nil all the time you use it. Blah 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 blah. It's error prone. There are many patterns to avoid these kind of things. For example, the null pattern. Yes, and we can start thinking about. We can go a little bit further and say, could we remove nil from the image? Could we do that? Why not? For example, object has a superclass nil, but we could do the same thing that Faro does, and object has a superclass proto-object, and proto-object has a superclass proto-object. So, or we could have a no superclass object that says or represents nil. Yeah.
But Hernan, the point is you still have to check because the
of course.
No superclass is not the same protocol as a class.
Yeah, that's right. You will have to. It's not something that's going to help the VM. It's the other way around. It's going to be more difficult for the VM. But from the model point of view, from the user, it's easier to understand. Or for example, instead of initializing variables with nil, you could initialize them with an object that says not initialized. Yes? And then you will know when an object was not initialized or when an object was, let's say we have nil, or when a variable was set with nil. Because right now you don't have any idea if a variable is nil because it was not initialized or because somebody just put nil that is wrong. Yeah? So these kind of things could help a little bit. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. I think I'm running late, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the test. I'm not going to write them anymore. The idea now is to keep working, okay? We keep working. We know that the attendee cannot have an empty name. And the same thing will happen with the proposed talk. The proposed talk must have a name, yes? So what do? We do the same. We will have to put an assertion. That assertion is going to check that it's not empty. And then you start wondering, well, this is another kind of thing to keep in mind. Can a person be registered twice? Yes? So I create Lucas, I create you. And then I create another one. And I try to register the second one. Yes? If we run it, with the current implementation you will see it's going to fail because I'm using includes and I didn't define the equals on attendee. So what you have to do is you have to define equals, for example. That's one way to do it. Okay? And how are you going to define equals on the attendee? Well, something like this. Yes? You have to see that it's an attendee and then that is named with the same name. And what is his name? You will compare the strings. Okay, good enough. But then we'll have another case. For example, what if Lucas the first time goes and writes his name using lowercase, and then he forgets, he's doing too much work, goes again, he registers using uppercase. So we shouldn't allow him to do that. So now we have to change the equals to use case insensitive. And then, what if Lucas, sorry Lucas, he's taking a mate and writing at the same time, and he hit the space bar, and he writes his name with spaces. So that would fail too, and we would have to change the implementation to do a trim. When you create, the attendee will do a trim of the name. And the funny thing is that of course we have to implement the equals for those things and the hash, okay, you know that. But the funny thing is that you have the same problem for the proposed talks. Yes? Of course you cannot have two proposed talks with the same name, but also it doesn't mind if they are case sensitive, the names, or if they have spaces. Yes? So what's the common way to solve this problem? The common way is to repeat the code that is doing, the trim and the equals with the uppercase and everything in every place. Yes? That's very common. That's how Java people does it, but we small talkers don't do that. So what's the design tip? The design tips is something that you already know. It's very easy. Repeated code means we are forgetting an object. That's the main idea behind this. When you have repeated code, that means that you are forgetting an object that is going to verify the concept that is spread and copied all over the place. Yes? And when I teach, this is my teacher side of the talk, when I have to teach design and TDD and all those things, this is a very strong phrase, because from now on I always tell the guys, when you have a problem or when there is a problem in your model, it's because you are forgetting an object. I mean, that's the answer. There is an object that is not, that you forgot to verify or to put in your model. So here it's very easy to see. Yes, we have repeated code, so we are forgetting an object. One thing about this that is also important is that repeated code doesn't mean repeated text. Yeah, people think that code and text are the same thing, and they are not the same thing. Repeated code in this case means, for example, patterns of message sends that are equal. Yeah, pattern of collaborations that are equals. Or for example, having the same number of parameters going with all the messages all the time, or those kind of things. So how do you solve these problems? We have repeated code. I have 10 minutes more, don't I?
No, you don't.
How much do I have?
You have 5 minutes less.
Okay. So what's the idea? The idea is, no problem, I'll do it fast. The idea is to verify that concept. We did it in something that we call name. Yeah, and name is an object that does all those things for us, and we have it in one place. Yes. Where is it? Yes, it trims the string. It verifies that it's not an empty string, and it implements the equals and all the things that you need. And so now that problem is taken care of. You verify the concept. You don't have any more repeated code. And from now on, the only thing that you have to do is, for example, here in the attendee, in the instance creation message, say, just in case this is a string, as name. Okay? It's very simple. Okay. And this brings us to one that is very, very controversial. Can we have setters? I mean, it's very common for us to have setters and getters. Is it a good idea to create setters just because we have instance variables? Well, we should think a little bit on what happens if we have something like this. Let's say that we want to change Lucas' name because he forgot to put his last name. Yes? he wants to go his name on the application. So if we allow to change the name like this, that's the common way to do it. Could work. But what happens if Marcus is playing a joke on him? He knows his password and goes and says, I'm going to change Lucas' name with my name, Marcus. Yes? If the model allows us to do this, nobody will control that change. But the attendee exists more than as an attendee, but also as a relationship with the conference. So changing object is not as easy as we think. And if we allow to do this, we allow the model to, the model will allow us to make mistakes that I don't want people to make mistakes. Those kind of mistakes. So what's the idea? Well, use something that I call the synchronization. And the idea is that you create a new object that represents the attendee with the changes. In this case, I'm going to, the changed Lucas is going to have Marcus as name. And then, in this case, I tell the conference, synchronize Lucas with the changed Lucas. And the synchronize with, in this case, is going to verify, for example, that the attendee is registered only once. That the new attendee, the changed one, yes, doesn't have a name that already exists. Yeah? Okay? And the attendee is going to have a sync message, it's not here, that is going to copy all the objects from the one that it has to synchronize. So, doing so, we have always valid objects, yes? Not only a valid object because, the changed one is a valid object because we enforce that from the previous two tips. And we are enforcing that when you change an object, the new changed object would hold all the assertions and preconditions we have. So, design tip, last design tips. Oh, okay. So the idea is, forget about setters. You shouldn't have setters. You understand the joke because you're an English speaker. Ese perro se llama setter, sí, ese tipo de perro. No more setters.
If it's in blue, it's okay.
So yeah, what are you talking about? Yeah, no setters. Change objects synchronizing at once. Okay. So that's what I said. It's very helpful. Blah 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 blah. Okay, and those are the tips that I have for today. There are more. There are a lot of things that I'm not going to cover because we don't have time, but about this functional system that is very small, there are a lot of things that we have to take care of. For example, can an attendee change his name, the date? Can a conference change the dates? What happens if a conference wants to change the date but you already have registered people? Anyway, can a proposed talk be made by somebody that is not registered? Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so I will give you the presentations. There are more tips, and there are also more tips for TDD and questions. No questions? Yes. Oh, okay. I thought you said something. Yes.
Just quick. You didn't much refactor this time.
Well, I didn't have to program either. I didn't have time to do it, but
I guess that the repeat code can be refactored.
that's right. Yeah.
The refactor is the step to do.
Yeah. I didn't show it, but yeah, the idea is to do with refactoring tools. Yeah. Yes, Travis has, and I think it's the last one because if not.
So one of the first practices you had was the one I liked, where if you don't know what to call it, if you don't know what to call it right now, you just call it something silly. Is that why your tests were all named test 01, test 2, test 3, test 4?
No. The reason I used test 1, test 2 is because I wanted to follow a path in the presentation. Okay, but the first tip said use bad name use meaningless names instead of bad names, because the idea is that you will refactor in some moment, and so those test 1, test 2 should be renamed to have a real good name. Like, for example, changing an attendee name. An attendee with an empty name should not be allowed, or something like that.
Is the reason it's hard to find a good name sometimes, though, because you really shouldn't be doing what you're trying to do?
You shouldn't be doing what you're trying to do?
Well, sometimes, is it possible that sometimes you're trying to make a class that you're trying to put a name on it, but really this isn't a good class? And you should
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Does that come in the refactoring stage then, where you go ahead and make it and then say, well, yeah, the reason it was hard to name was because this should have never existed in the first place?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I think the final thing here is that when you don't know how to name something, is because you don't understand it. You don't completely understand it. You can name something when you understand it, and a name is like, is the. It's very difficult to say this in English, but a name is the essence. It represents the essence of what you are naming, and you can only know the essence of what you are talking about when you know it. So, programming is a learning process, and the learning process is having good names is about also the learning process. And
so is there a risk that in frustration for a good name, I throw the class name brainfuck in my program and find it dead 3 years later because I find it...
Well, if you could do that, but you have to do the refactor someday, so... the idea is that you will do the refactor someday, okay? If you're never going to refactor, you're never going to change a bad name or a meaningless name, so try to put a bad name anyway. But the idea is to do it. Okay, I think we don't have more time, so thank you, and let's go to it.